Thank you, Frank Cowell, so much for being with me today. Through this venture of entrepreneurship that I've had the blessing to be a part of at the Business Growers, I've had the pleasure of meeting so many interesting people. At the top of the list is Frank Cowell, Chief Revenue Boss, which he'll get into in a minute, at Revenue Ranch. He is in San Diego, and a few weeks ago, early last month, I was in San Diego at an event for agency owners. I was placed at a table intentionally. I was chosen to sit at a certain table with folks, and I see this cool cat with a hat on, and the more I got to know him, the more I really not only enjoyed talking to you, Frank, but really felt like you had so much insight about the operational side of a business, which, quite frankly, is a very weak component for me and my business. Just hired a VP of Ops a couple of months ago because I realized that I'm bad at it. So I'm really excited about talking to you about not only your story, but really the ups and downs of business ownership, entrepreneurship. You've got a lot of experience in agencies, but the folks that are listening are everything from startups to have grown and sold successful businesses and everything in between. So thank you, Frank, for being on. Thank you for being a great person to meet in San Diego. I'm excited for our listeners to get to know you here on the No Grow Scale podcast. So if you don't mind, I teased a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, but if you don't mind, just tell us about your story, your background. You've had some recent changes, so how your journey to where you are now, what that looks like.
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me, Laura. It's been great to get to meet you and know you. So looking forward to our conversation today. But a bit about me. So my background, I started out in the quote unquote agency space back in 2003, 2004, really before the word agency was thrown around to reference, web shops, dev shops, design, brand, creative. That word was usually reserved for typical ad agency, your Mad Men style business, if you will. So it really wasn't even referred to like that back then. And, I had been doing work on the internet, on the web since the late 90s, helping people with, web development and web projects and marketing around that and whatnot. And so it kind of got started there, primarily doing web development. And then over time, I morphed my agency into more of a full service creative agency where we were not only doing web dev, but brand development, commercial quality videos, collateral, general marketing support, you name it. And then over time, I eventually realized that I wanted to be out of the project-based business and I wanted to be in the recurring revenue model, as is the desire of many agency owners I know, to create that much needed predictability. And so probably about 7 years ago, 7 years ago, started to make that transition to more of a recurring services business model, which got more into digital marketing as opposed to digital asset building, like, web and other properties and assets and brand and whatnot. And so along that journey, grew the agency. We're a HubSpot partner, became one of the diamond tier partners there. Had a lot of great successful things going on. But all along that journey, what I was most passionate about is building frameworks and systems and then passing that along to either my team or to my clients. And so in that journey, I also took that same approach with management and growth of the business. And so I studied a lot of business management frameworks and systems and implemented lots of different things, saw what I liked, saw what I didn't like, and then filled in the gaps based on my own knowledge, my own experience, conversations I had, talking with lots of other entrepreneurs. And so ultimately what I did was I created a framework that was an amalgamation of many, many different frameworks that are out there in the marketplace, simplified some and a great deal in some ways, expanded upon others in some ways. And I just started to document that. So I put that in play at my agency and largely got it running to the point where it ran without me, which is always what I wanted. I'm a firm believer that if you're an entrepreneur, your job is to put yourself out of a day-to-day job when you're building your ventures. If you want to be in the business and you enjoy the craft of the business, that's fine. And there's no knock against that. That's nothing that's wrong or bad. But then I tend to see that as more of a business operator. And again, nothing wrong with that. But I lean more towards the attraction of being an entrepreneur where I create systems that other people can leverage and other people can gain value from. And so as such, I aim to eventually put myself out of the job so I can move out of the agency space. So that's what I did recently is I exited my agency on a day-to-day basis. I still own some percentage of it, and my partners own the other percentage, and they run it. And so now I'm on to my next venture, which is I've been coaching agency owners for about the past 6 years, and I've now formalized that into my next venture with its own brand, its own identity, its own offering.
That's awesome. Well, congrats to you. It sounds like you're moving in a fun new direction. So that's amazing. What do you feel like, because you've been, and when I met you, we talked a lot about just the ups and downs, and we were around a group of agency owners also talking about ups and downs. And regardless of whether or not you're listening and you're in the agency space or you're an entrepreneur in another industry, leading a business is not easy. And, one of the things that you said that has stuck with me, and that actually since I have come back has been just a mantra for me, is you can't grow the business, you can't have the same person focused on growing the business and keeping the business. And I may have just stolen the answer to the question, probably not, but I feel like that is, just one of the most profound things I've heard, because it's so true and it's so practical. So what is one of the most important lessons you would say you've learned in leading the agency in the agency world, or leading a business?
Yeah, so why don't we expand upon that, the growing the business, keeping the business. So what we're talking about there is oftentimes what I find when I come across agency owners that get to a point where they hit a ceiling, they hit a wall, and they're just not able to break out of it. No matter what they do, no matter what they try, they kind of still stay at this same level, and getting to the next level with a radical shift in the jump that they're trying to make just isn't happening. One of the things that I find is just not the only, but one of the things I find that's very common is this idea that the head of the agency is heavily involved in getting clients, and then they're also heavily involved in the keeping clients part. And that's the part that you were referencing. And I find
I butchered it. Sorry, I said it wrong, but
is one of the don't worry about it. The sentiment was accurate. And I find that to be one of the major reasons that holds agency owners back from growing their agency, is they're too involved in too many disparate areas. Now, as an agency owner, you have to wear multiple hats, especially when you're smaller, and you have to dig your hands into things such as administrative or finance. You have to do that, and you have to go land clients. But I find the two that you shouldn't mix, I should say. The two you shouldn't mix is the getting clients part and the keeping the clients part. So the getting the clients part is all about whatever your main focus is and whatever works for you, but it's the marketing and sales. Some people are more sales heavy, some people are more marketing heavy, but whatever it is, it's client acquisition. And so those activities really are of a person's job, and even if you're wearing multiple hats, it's going to be at least 80% of your job. Well, now the keeping clients part, which is making sure the clients are serviced and they're given what they're promised, and there's process and there's measurement and it's gross profitable. That also is going to be an 80 to 100% job or more for somebody. So in a agency that you're trying to take to the next level, if you're doing both, that means you're doing both to the degree that they're getting shortchanged. Neither one is truly getting the attention it deserves. So what I often recommend when I come across these agency owners that are going through this is you need a second person who is an owner-like individual. And I'm not suggesting if you're a single individual business owner that you have to give up equity. I'm not suggesting at all. And in many cases, that can be not a great idea. And there may be cases where it can be a good idea. So I'm not suggesting that you need to bring on a shareholder partner. But what I am suggesting is you need to get the person that can come on and behave like an owner and be incentivized like an owner and who is driven and passionate about that thing. So if you're the agency owner who's really great at getting clients and you love it, then do that. And you need to find someone who's not just a VA, not just a good project manager that you can elevate. We're talking someone who's on your level, on your talent level, on your experience level, someone who's on your passion level about the operations, which is the fulfilling of the offering, which ultimately, if you're doing it right, you keep clients, right? So you need to find someone who's that caliber that you can bring into your business. Otherwise, if it's someone that is more junior that you think you can direct, that's not going to work. It's still going to be a lot of your mind share and a lot of your direction. And ultimately what you want is you want to start letting go so that way other brains can come in, other smart brains can come in and they can flourish. So if you're in that situation, I would pick one. Find which one that you really care about until eventually you can elevate out of that. And that's possible too, which is what I did in my agency. I elevated out of all of the major functions and I just was the general management and the CEO. So that is a massive holdback, if you will, a massive blocker for a lot of agency owners.
Just because I'm experiencing that in our agency, in my agency right now, I feel like, I'm so glad you said, don't find somebody that you can direct, because it's not going to achieve, even from an internal culture standpoint, somebody that our whole team can respect, that has some longevity, maybe not necessarily in the industry, but just someone who has merited that level of respect, regardless of age, but in tenure and what they've done. That, when I brought on my VP of Ops, that just, to me, we went next level immediately. And she had a learning curve. She had
Absolutely.
a lot to do to learn, particularly, and we laugh about it, but she had been Microsoft Teams for 9 years in her previous business. So from a getting up to speed in our Google world, because we're a Google Workspace folks, some of those things, it took her a minute to get up to speed. But from a culture and a respect standpoint for somebody at that level, I think that's huge that you said, don't just hire somebody that can offload some administrative type things, hire somebody that really can keep the business or run whatever you choose, do the other. So that's great advice to any entrepreneur, I think.
Yeah, it reminds me of a saying that a friend of mine told me years ago, who is also a successful agency individual. And he said, you're doing it right when in the sales meetings that you have with your prospective clients, you talk less and less, and the people that you've built around you and you bring to the table in those sales meetings, they're doing 80 to 90% of the talking. And that really stuck out to me because you can apply that to anywhere in the business when it comes to leading operations, leading admin, leading finance, leading marketing, leading sales, and all those major functions. How much are you directing the how? It's okay as the leader to direct the what. Here's what needs to happen in terms of outcome. How you get there needs to be driven by smart individuals on your team who are invested and aligned with the true north of the business, which is another thing that we can talk about because that's kind of the second major thing that I look at when guiding an agency.
Well, go ahead and talk about it. I want to hear your true north, because you did touch on that a little bit when we were speaking together. And I loved, I feel like I'm not even 2 years in. So as an agency owner, I did, an LLC previously that I had no intent to hire anybody, didn't care to. And then in a different stage of life, started a business that I did want to hire people and grow. But finding that true north as early as possible is key. And you saying that just affirmed that. So talk about that and don't give all your secrets away. I know you get paid to talk,
No, it's okay.
to talk about it, but I think it's brilliant. So yeah, talk about that a little bit.
No, it's okay. I actually have this. I'm pulling some nuggets as part of a training that I've actually put on my website that, if you want, I can direct people to. But really, when a business gets started, a professional services business like an agency gets started, the reason I talk first about the get clients, keep clients is strategically that doesn't come first when I'm analyzing an existing business and helping optimize it. But when it's first getting off the ground, you kind of have to start there and use what I call a lot of just brute force, right? You're good at a craft and you're going to hypothesize, here's how I'm going to put it together as a service offering. Now let's go get the clients for it. Okay. And then you're going to deliver and get the feedback, and then you're going to go get more clients. But at a certain point, if you want to take things to the next level, that brute force only gets you so far. So now we come into needing to be much more strategic. You kind of need to have what, I call your agency MBA. You need to really have your business skills in running an agency or professional services business. And so one key aspect, there's two sides of that. There's strategy and execution. And so on the strategy piece, I refer to that as having a true north team. And so what do I mean by that? What I mean is you have a true north defined, and then you have a team, a full team of people that are aligned on it and excited by it. So what makes up the true north? Well, what makes up the true north is a strong vision, mission, values, and strategic brand definition. Those are the four major components. The vision is really about you. It's your selfish view of what you want to achieve in the world as a company, whether that impact is on your team or the impact on the world, but it's what you see the business looking like in the impacts it's going to make on the world in which you serve. The mission then is how you're going to make that happen. Now, oftentimes when people create mission statements, it's one simple paragraph. There's three major components in the standard definition of it. But I expand upon that a bit when I help people define the mission statement, because if done right, and if you define the components correctly in it, it becomes a strategic decision lens for everything you do in the business. If you get crystal clear on the components that go into that mission, and you're passionate about those things, and it's something that you're willing to, commit everything to, and then on a day-to-day basis, make sure that all your decisions and plans align with that, that becomes a strategic business tool. And so often the mission statement is kind of just like, oh, we develop it and it goes on the website somewhere and we throw it in the drawer. And I don't think people realize how strategic of a decision that is, of the components that go in the mission. So there's that aspect. And then you have the values, which is to say, okay, we know now the direction we want to go with our vision. We know how we're going to get there through our mission, right? The things that we're going to execute at a high level. The values then tell you, here are the kind of people we need to then execute that mission towards our vision. So do you see how we're now stacking a hierarchy, right? The vision is your North Star. The mission is the activities, the things, the strategic decisions you're going to make in your business to get there on an execution basis. And then the values are the kind of people you need to surround yourself with that are capable of making that happen. And then finally, the brand are the key pieces of language that you articulate to the world to communicate all of that in a way that's compelling to your target audience. And so having that in place to where it's clear and compelling, and everyone on your team knows it, everyone on your team is reminded by it, and you make sure that you only hire people that are aligned with that and excited by it. And by the way, people that aren't, you get them off your team quickly.
Yep.
So that's your job as the business owner, as CEO, whatever your title is. You have to make sure you only have a true north team. And then, that's the strategy piece, the true north piece.
Right. So what would you say to someone who does have their mission on their website and like they couldn't tell you what it, I have worked for companies and I've been a part of organizations that, their mission is just to check it off the list, and they don't have this framework built around it that really drives, what I believe is the what gets you up every day type of mentality. That part of it is what you just talked about. And then I would say 90% of the businesses today, in America are driven by a mission statement on a website or on a nice, poster board, I guess, when you walk in or whatever. What would you say to a business owner who might fall in that guilty, I'm the guy that's got, or the woman that's got the mission statement that means nothing? Where do you start?
Well, it's never too late to revisit it and go back and make sure that the components that go into defining it are strategic business decisions. And the way I look at it, the lens through which I look, is it's all based on the customer. It's all based on the client of the business. So who do you choose? And how do you get much more specific about defining that person? So here's a classic example of one big mistake. A lot of organizations, when they define the primary client that goes into that mission statement, they'll be very broad and vague. And if you can't take that definition and go reasonably build a list from it, it's not clear enough. It's not specific enough. So one mistake a lot of people make in the components that go into their mission is they're just too broad and vague. They're not clear enough. They don't draw a line in the sand. And that's where I find a lot of agency owners get real nervous and get real timid, is they don't want to draw a line in the sand on some of these strategic business decisions around who they're going to serve, the transformation they bring, the differentiation, the promises, those things aren't clear enough. They're not sharp enough. And so when you answer each of these components, they need to be sharp and clear and draw a line in the sand. So that way, when you put them into the statement, then you're like, oh, wow, it's very clear when our decisions are out of alignment with that. But when you answer those things with vagary, then you kind of have a lot of wiggle room to kind of make a lot of different decisions on a day-to-day basis and tackle a lot of different projects that maybe take you away from that.
And I imagine,
it's too vague.
Tell me if you agree, a lot of times it's too vague because if you start really getting sharp and narrow, you eliminate revenue opportunities.
Correct. It's what do the kids call it today? It's the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. And I will tell you that the more centric you are, the more vanilla you are, the less magnetic you are. So the more you're willing to polarize, the more magnetic you become. Dan Kennedy, who's a great marketer, he's a direct response marketer, direct marketer that's been around for a long time. He's a legend. He has one of my favorite sayings about brands and marketing. He says, great brands repel as much as they attract. And I feel like marketers today, and we're putting on our marketing hat as we try to market our agencies, right? I feel like people in marketing today are just too timid. They're worried about pleasing the most people. And that approach actually produces the weakest messaging and the weakest marketing. So how do you repel as much as you attract? Well, the way you repel is you say, we're for this person. And by default, we're not for people who aren't that. And so those decisions are really important. And then you have to stick to them and you have to be relentless. And the effects don't happen overnight. But just like anything of any significance, they happen over time and they're compounding the longer you stick to it.
So what would you say? So we've talked about, some important lessons that you've learned leading businesses. What would you say are some major mistakes? And we talked a little bit about those too, but an agency or an organization would face when they really get in growth mode. So I call kind of our framework, know, grow, and scale. Those are the packages that we offer in terms of when somebody's coming to us, we kind of audit where they are in their business and decide where we feel like how much gas they need, basically, for that season of growth. So when a company gets in growth mode, which we know, I would hope they figured out who's growing or who's selling, who's not in terms of leadership. But what are some pitfalls or some major mistakes that you're seeing, whether it's your clients or not, that you can provide some insight for those that are listening?
Well, a couple of big things come to mind. So one, I mentioned the true north aspect. So one is just not regularly reminding the team about it, not holding people accountable to it. And then the other side of that is not celebrating. So what we should be doing as businesses is celebrating every positive step that moves us in the direction towards that vision picture. And so we don't celebrate enough and we don't remind people enough about the true north. And we don't get people out of the organization fast enough who are not aligned with that. So misalignment with true north, not reinforcing it enough, that's one huge mistake. Now let's talk about execution. Another big mistake is getting an agency off the ground and getting to a certain point where like, hey, we have some success. At a certain point, those activities just no longer work to grow the agency. And so you have to become much more strategic, which is the strategy and execution I talk about. But once people get into an execution rhythm, they tend to let it fall off. And so I can't tell you how many organizations I've come across where they adopt some sort of execution methodology and they'll run it for a few months. And then they come up with all sorts of excuses why they need to break their rhythms. We have a client fire. Oh, we just had someone quit. We just had our biggest client cancel. And all of those things are important events, but they're not important enough to take you out of your execution rhythms and to take you out of completing the strategic initiatives you already committed to. And so that's another thing I find is that people forsake their previous commitments at the drop of a hat. As soon as that client fire comes up, as soon as that employee fire comes up, they are just willing to drop their previous commitments that they made with full sound mind when they got together, they did their planning, and everyone nodded their head and said, yes, this is what we need to do next. Boom, let's do it. And then the moment that chaos comes, they forsake those commitments. So that's the second thing that I find is that they don't have a culture of what I call elite execution. And in elite execution, we don't forsake our rhythms. We keep our commitments. We finish those projects. We have transparency. We have accountability. We keep our rhythms. That's the next thing that I find that happens is they tend to fall apart and not stick to the fundamentals, that those rhythms and that discipline. And then
so what do you recommend? Oh, go ahead.
Then the third big thing that I find that businesses make, agencies and businesses in general, is they don't stay close to the client or the customer. They don't talk enough to the marketplace. They don't talk enough to their clients. And so I said earlier that, an agency owner that's getting the client shouldn't be involved in keeping the clients. I don't mean that you shouldn't talk to your clients. What I mean is you shouldn't be the one to move the service forward and be the strategist and check on the project management, all that. But regular conversations with the marketplace, whether that's your existing clients or prospective clients, needs to happen regularly. Businesses need to hear what the client values. They need to hear what's making an impact on the client. Otherwise, what we do as business owners is we start inventing offerings that we get excited by, but don't really bring value to the client. We start to bloat our offerings, by the way. Like, how many of you agencies listening today have services where you've got now a delivery list that's a mile long, and a lot of these things the client didn't even ask for, but you're doing them because it's the quote unquote right way to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm not suggesting that people get sloppy in their execution, but you should really examine what is the client after and what's the minimum amount of projects or the minimum amount of deliverables or the minimum amount of initiatives we need to drive that result. And how can we be more world-class at fewer things and still drive the same result? Would you rather have a business that promises a result doing 3 activities or 30 activities? Well, you'd pick the one with 3 because it's a simpler business. It's an easier business to scale. And so not listening to the client and not examining what the client truly needs is something that I find is a major sin of a lot of growing businesses, is they kind of fall out of listening to the client and they fall out of those close relationships.
Right. And if you really think about it, I'm, thinking for the services and products that I'm interested in buying as either a mom or a business owner or whatever hat I'm wearing that day, I would much rather buy from somebody who does the 3 things because I know they've got to be really good at it. I don't necessarily want to buy hair products from somebody that does hair products and makeup and does clothes. And, although Jessica Simpson is ruling the world, with all of her products, I do. I think she's got a little bit of everything, but you want as a consumer, I want somebody that I feel confident knows how to do what I'm paying them to do. And I think that we, again, going back to that FOMO, we feel like as an agency owner, if we don't add this little extra thing, we're causing them to miss out. And really, when you start evaluating your services, sometimes you realize, hey, I'm spending this much to offer a service that nobody cares about. So that's a really very practical.
Yeah. So what I often say is once we have those 2 business fundamentals, right? You have your agency MBA, you're good at strategy, you're good at execution, the true north and the elite execution. The very next thing that you have to revisit is operations, which is the offering. And so I say that you have to have what I call a world-class offering. And there's 5 hallmarks, in my opinion, of what a world-class offering is. It's repeatable, it's scalable, it's delightful, it's valuable, and it's profitable. So those are the 5 things. So I would suggest that every one of your listeners right now, take a look at your offering and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 on each of those 5 components. Repeatable. Repeatable means that what you sell follows generally the same process every time. It's repeatable, whether that's brand creative work, web projects, SEO, content marketing, what have you. Scalable means that you can relatively easily find people to follow that repeatable process. So an example of a business that's repeatable but not very scalable, let's say you have a business that's, you do brand positioning work and you have a process for it. It's repeatable. You do the same process every time and it's amazing. But it might not be all that scalable because it requires someone with 30 years of experience who has got this amazing authority when it comes to brand development and brand knowledge and marketplace knowledge in a particular industry. Might not be all that scalable. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but when you look at the totality and rate yourself on all these 5 components, if your total average is like 3, You got a problem with the business model, if that makes sense. Delightful means that the client enjoys the experience, and ideally they talk to you as little as possible. They have to give you as little input as possible. That's not always possible, but that's the ideal scenario. Can your client get a result after giving you very little input and not have to show up to meeting after meeting, help you with edit after edit, and so on? That's the delightful part. Valuable means that they're getting a 10x ROI. Now, a lot of agencies aren't delivering 10x ROI, but if you're here today and you're not, I want you to start aiming for, if you're doing 5 now, get to 6. If you're doing 6 now, get to 7. But you should be aiming to be a 10x agency. How do you deliver 10x ROI so that you're valuable to your client? And then finally, profitable. Is it profitable for the agency? Are you on a producer by producer basis getting a 3 to 4 to 1, what we call direct labor efficiency ratio? Are you getting that on direct producers? Are you getting close to 4 to 1? If not, you have to take a look at that. And again, you got to combine all these together and see where you stand when you rate yourself. But that's when you have a world-class offering, when you're averaging 4+ on these 5 things. That's
great. That's so good. So we talked about what advice you would give to someone starting a business. I feel like maybe that was your advice. You tell me if otherwise, but the mission, the vision, really the North Star, I feel like that's the best advice you could even give to anybody that's starting a business. But what about selling a business? Since you are helping and coaching a lot of folks through that, I believe now, and tell us what you're doing at Revenue Ranch too. I want to hear more about that. But what's a piece of advice that you would give to somebody selling a business? This is, I think, what a lot of people are, some people start a business just because they want to have fun and not go work for the man, or whatever. And then some people start a business to grow it and scale it and sell it. So tell me kind of your top tips for somebody who might be looking to eventually sell a business.
Well, I think at minimum, you have to run your business as if someone would buy it one day. As if, right? So all of these functions that I talked about, you want to master them in a particular order. You want to have a process for doing that. You want to have really great business skills, and you want to build a team around you of excellent people. Now, the sad reality is a lot of the folks that join your teams early on may not be the folks that take you to the next level. And so you have to look at that and be honest with yourself, including yourself. You have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, which role am I best suited to serve? Because ultimately, especially in an agency, people are buying the people. They're buying the talent that you've assembled. And so you need to be working towards a world-class executive team where you have a leader of each of those major functions that I've been talking about: marketing, sales, operations, admin, finance. You have a good general manager, a COO, if you will. And so have you built a team of people that are experts? So people, it's really critical. The other thing people are going to look at, if you're going to sell, they're going to look at a couple of things. What is your growth trend? And then what is your bottom line profitability? And then there are some other things that are going to be very unique to very specific buying scenarios, such as you might have a business that's interested in you because they want to be in your space and you represent a great bolt on to what they're doing. You have some people who are like, we just need more bodies. This is, an acqui-hire. We just need more people doing what we already do, right? You might have a competition play where they're, hey, you're a thorn on our side and we just need to get you out of our way. I mean, there are a number of different reasons then that you get into specific scenarios, but generally speaking, obsessing about world-class people. And again, you have to put your ego aside, stepping out of the way, your growth trend combined with the profitability. And so those kind of can play off of each other. So if you don't have a real strong growth trend over the past, 3 to 5 years, but your bottom line profitability is just, rock solid. It's some of the best in the industry. That's also going to be a good news story. Whereas let's say you're only pushing 12% profitability bottom line every year, which isn't, it's not terrible, but it's not all that great either. But you're showing, a 52% year over year growth for the past 3+ years because you've just tapped into something in the marketplace. Your offering is something that is taking off. And so that's going to be a good news story as well. But again, what I would say is your business skills and how you run the business and the people that you bring on to your executive team, your management team, and the accuracy of how you look at the business in terms of projections and numbers and calculations and planning, that's going to go a long way. So whether you want to sell your business or not, you're at least going to experience the maximum potential that your business has to offer.
Yeah, that's good. So such great insight. I feel like these are takeaways, whether you own an agency or own any business in any industry. I feel like you've provided a lot of great insight and inspiration, really. I'm fired up just hearing you talk. But tell me this, and this might be a little selfish ask, but pretend it's not. What are, in the first 3 years of a business, let's just assume everybody that's listening is between a 3 and 5 year, maybe just less than 10, we'll say less than 10 years. What are the most critical hires? And if you know, it might be agency specific or it might be just business specific, but what do you think are those 3 hires that you have to get right in those first few early years of a business?
Well, I'll go back to something we already talked about, which is the get clients, keep clients. So I think right away, you have to have that minimum 2 really driven, high quality, experienced people who know how to produce and get things done. So on the get client side, you need someone who's got a great game plan for going and getting clients. And they're going to be relentless. They're excellent at it and they enjoy it. And then you need someone who is passionate about the craft, whatever it is, the service you're selling. You might just be an SEO only shop. You might be content marketing. You might be paid. You might be creative, brand, full service PR, whatever. The craft, you need someone heading up the operations that is passionate. They're good. They know how to direct people. They know how to start to build a team around them, process, projections, that whole 9. So at minimum, you've got to make sure that you have 2 strong people doing that. Then as you grow, it's going to be based on the bottleneck in your business. So you might have a bottleneck on the production side, just finding people, in which case you might need to have, emphasize project management. Project management might be a huge need for you based on the delivery of your offering. It might be sales. It might be you need someone to now follow up with all of these leads. Those are more tactical things that are based on the bottleneck. But if we get into more strategic hires after that, after you have someone selling and someone delivering for clients, I would say someone to really own finance and administration. So later on, you're going to break those out into 2 functions. It's going to get big enough to where, in my opinion, what ends up happening in a lot of organizations is admin gets relegated under finance forever. And I think that's a bad move because the administrative function is there to support the organization. And oftentimes the decisions a finance team will make about supporting the organization will be to be as cheap as possible, to spend as little as possible. But there comes a time where that is actually going to be a detriment to your brand. Why? Because you're making decisions to spend as little as possible on supporting the organization, when if you just stepped on the gas a little bit there and really treated your team as your best asset and figuring out how you can support them in the best way possible through your facilities, through the equipment they have, through the training they have, through the people support they have, now they're going to flourish, which is going to make happier clients through a better product and so on. And that grows your business. But in the beginning, you're probably going to have one person who truly can own finance and admin until you get to a point where you can split those out. So that's a next strategic hire, is making sure that your finance and administration is dialed in and someone owns that. So that way it's not just yet another nuisance on your neck as a business owner where, I'm doing the selling and I'm participating in some client delivery. And now I'm also finance and admin. And so at minimum, if you were to look at those 3 leaders, knowing that one of you is going to also have to play general manager and wear that hat, from a strategic standpoint, now you've got the makings of a management team that starts to form. 3 people, one for getting clients, the one heading up the services for to keep the clients, and then the one finance admin, which is to support the organization. With those 3 strong people in place, and again, before you expand out those roles and start busting out marketing and sales and admin finance, get a separate general manager, before you do that, with those 3 strong people, now you can really obsess about the value of your offering, your rhythms that you get in, your accountability rhythms, how you execute, making sure you're keeping in line with that North Star. you can go a long ways before you have to start to bust those apart.
That was really encouraging to me to hear you say that about the finance and admin part, because that's an outsourced function for me internally right now, but I'm feeling the weight of it, even being outsourced. And even as an outsourced service, professional service myself, I do feel like there's really no, you can't really replace somebody that's inside in your business every day. It's just not possible. You can do really great work as an agency, but I'm not in every client's business all day, every day, aligned, internally. So I do feel like, and that particular role, especially if you're growing quickly, and I actually was a little surprised to hear you say the finance and the administrative. And so that was encouraging to hear, because I think outsourcing that right now is not necessarily a bottleneck, but it's definitely an area for strong improvement that we have coming.
Well, look, there comes a time pretty quickly in a business's growth where the needs to support the organization start to become a full-time job. So yes, you can outsource finance, but then you also have a lot of other activities to support the org. You have some day-to-day bookkeeping stuff. So what the model I like is where you get a strong manager leader in there who's more of like a staff accountant. They've had a decent amount of finance experience, but also doesn't mind doing the admin stuff. And they can be kind of like a manager of all those activities. And you still outsource kind of like your bookkeeping stuff. Right? Like let that person handle the bigger picture stuff, being really a main, like a key individual to support the org. Because if you think about admin and finance, it's there to support the organization. And so if the organization is getting shortchanged on its support, that's not going to bode well for you either. Right. So yes, I think you can outsource some of the finance stuff that's maybe closing of books or doing accrual finance, accounting, and doing some day-to-day bookkeeping. But if you had a manager there who's more of a generalized individual who's got good accounting finance experience, they can then also handle all the admin stuff, and then be part of that management team to really take a look at like, okay, how are we growing this company? What do we need next? And that person's going to be a valuable voice to help you understand what the organization needs in terms of support.
Yeah, that's great. Such good advice. I feel like this is in so many different ways. You've really hit on a lot of things that will benefit every listener. So what are you, as we kind of wrap up, what are you excited about? What is Frank excited about in his life? What do you have coming up in 2023 that lights a fire in you? I'd love to hear what gets you going for this year and what your vision is for what you have ahead.
Yeah, I'm really excited to work with agency owners and help them install the methodologies that I've been talking about, the strategy and execution methodology, and really taking my 18 plus years of having, been in the agency space and transferring that knowledge and helping people really just transform the chaos of agency life into, a system where they have consistent growth. So there's, predictable revenue, more profit, but more importantly, personal freedom. I mean, that's really what I aim to help people do. So, I've left the agency world within the past few months. I've now taken a lot of the coaching that I've also been doing during that journey, and I've turned it into a company called Revenue Ranch. And so right now we've got a program that we're teaching people and helping people implement into their agencies. And so that's kind of like phase one. And then in the future phases, we're going to have some additional programs. We're also going to have a physical place that people can go to, and that we're going to be doing events. We're going to be doing all sorts of transformational kind of experiences. Hence the name Revenue Ranch. We'll actually have a physical ranch that it will be this juxtaposition of these experiences where there's business, but then there's also these mentally transformational activities that take place. So I'm really excited about the future of that and the vision of that. But for now,
Sign me up for that. Let me know when that happens. That sounds amazing.
For now, I'm really excited about getting this implemented with as many agencies as possible.
That's great. One step at a time, right? So if there is an agency owner listening, where would they find information on your program? How would they learn more about you? Can you give us that information before we
So I have an online training that goes into quite a bit more detail on the things that we've been talking about today. So it's going to take what we talked about today and expand upon that. It's about an hour-long training that I've set up that people can go to. It's free, totally free. So if you're interested in that, you want to hear more, Yeah, go to freemyagency.com, and sign up for the training. It's totally free. And if you're interested in talking after that, then you have an opportunity to get in touch with us. But I think that's the best first and foremost thing. I don't believe in just pitching people right away. You've heard me. Maybe you like what I have to say. Hey, go learn some more. There's some more training for you to capture. Go check it out at freemyagency.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Frank. You're a delight to talk to always, and I hope I get to see you in California. I don't know that you'll be in Mississippi anytime soon, so next time I'm in California, I will let you know.
Connect.
Hope to get to see you in person again soon.
Care.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to the Know, Grow, Scale podcast. If you want to learn more about Frank, his information will be in our show notes. If you would like to learn more about the Business Growers and what we are doing, you can find us at thebusinessgrowers.com.